Welcome to the Midnight Storyteller channel. Tonight we present a soothing bedtime reading of Kokoro by Natsume Soseki. This is the last video in the series. If you haven't listened to the first video, please click the link in the description below. Now, please enjoy the last video. Kokoro by Natsume Soseki Part 2, Parents and I Chapter 1. When I returned home, I was surprised to find that my father's health hadn't changed much since I last saw him. "Oh, you're back. That's good. It's nice that you were able to graduate. Just a moment, I'm going to wash my face." My father was out in the garden doing something. He waved a dirty handkerchief tied behind his old straw hat to block the sun as he walked around to the back where the well was. I was embarrassed in front of my father, who was more pleased with my graduation than I had expected. "It's great that you were able to graduate," he kept repeating. In my mind, I compared my father's joy with Sensei's expression when he said, "Congratulations" at the dinner table on the night of the graduation ceremony. To me, Sensei, who congratulated me with words but seemed to criticize me internally, appeared more dignified than my father, who was overly delighted by something not that significant. Eventually, I began to feel uncomfortable with my father's unsophisticated enthusiasm stemming from his ignorance. Graduating from university isn't that remarkable. Hundreds of people graduate every year. I finally spoke out. My father looked puzzled. "I'm not saying it's great just because you graduated. Sure, graduating is great, but there's more to it. If only you understood." I wanted to hear more from my father. He seemed reluctant to talk, but eventually said, "In short, it's great for me. You know about my illness. Last winter when I saw you, I thought I might not last past March or April. But somehow, I'm still here, able to move around freely, and now you've graduated. So I'm happy. It's better for a parent to see their child graduate while they're still healthy rather than after they've passed away. For you, graduating from university might not seem like a big deal, but from my perspective, it's significant. Do you understand?" I had no words. I was more than ashamed. I was humbled. My father seemed to be at peace with his mortality, and he had expected to die before I graduated. I had foolishly never considered how much my graduation meant to him. I took out my diploma from my bag and showed it to my father and mother with great care. The certificate had been crushed and lost its shape. My father carefully smoothed it out. "Such things should be carried rolled up." "You should have put something sturdy in the middle," my mother advised. After looking at it for a while, my father stood up, went to the alcove, and placed the certificate prominently where it could be seen by anyone. Normally, I would have said something immediately, but at that moment, I felt completely different. I had no desire to argue with my father or mother. I silently let my father do as he pleased. The certificate, made of delicate paper, didn't cooperate easily and kept trying to fall over once placed. Chapter 2. I called my mother aside and asked about my father's condition. "Father seems so energetic going out into the garden and doing things. Is he really okay?" "He seems perfectly fine now. He's probably gotten better." My mother was surprisingly calm. Living in the remote countryside, she was quite ignorant about such matters. I recalled how shocked and worried she had been when my father had collapsed before, but the doctor said at that time that his condition was serious. That's why the human body is such a mystery. The doctor was so grave about it, but look at him now. I was worried initially, trying to keep him from moving too much, but you know his stubborn nature. He believes he knows his body best and won't listen to me. I remembered how my father had insisted on getting up and shaving when I last visited. Considering his words then, I'm fine now. Mother is just being overly cautious. I couldn't fully blame her. I wanted to say, but you should still be a bit careful, but held back. I explained what I knew about his illness, much of it based on what Sensei and his wife had told me. My mother didn't seem particularly moved, only saying, I see, it's the same illness. How unfortunate. How old was that person when they died? Seeing no point in continuing with my mother, I went directly to my father. He listened to me more seriously than my mother did. You're right, but ultimately, I know my body best after years of experience. Hearing this, my mother smiled wryly. See? But father is fully aware of his situation. He said he's so happy about my graduation because he didn't think he'd live to see it. He says that, but deep down, he probably believes he'll be fine. Do you think so? He expects to live another 10 or 20 years, though sometimes he does say things like, I don't have much time left. What will you do when I'm gone? Will you stay here alone? Suddenly I imagined our old, spacious countryside house without my father, leaving my mother alone. I wondered what my brother would do, what my mother would say, and if I could comfortably live in Tokyo, detached from this land. I remembered Sensei's advice to secure any inheritance while my father was still healthy. People who keep saying they're going to die often live on. Father might live many more years. It's the quiet, healthy ones who are more dangerous. I listened silently to my mother's cliched words, unsure if they were based on logic or experience. Chapter 3. My parents decided to throw a celebration with red rice for me. Since the day I returned, I had been secretly fearing this. I immediately refused. Please don't make such a big deal out of it. I disliked country gatherings. People who attended only to drink and eat bothered me, and I felt uncomfortable among them since childhood. The thought of them coming for my sake made it even worse. However, I couldn't outright tell my parents to avoid inviting those rustic people. I only insisted it was too much. It's not a big deal. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. It's only natural to host guests. Don't be so reserved. My mother seemed to regard my university graduation with the same weight as getting married. We don't have to invite them, but if we don't, they'll talk. This was my father's view. He was concerned about their gossip. Indeed, they tended to comment if things didn't go as expected in such situations. It's different from Tokyo. The countryside is nosy, my father added. And for your father's sake, my mother chimed in. I couldn't argue. I decided to let them do as they pleased. If it's for me, please don't. But if it's to avoid gossip, that's different. I can't insist on something that would harm you. Don't be so logical. My father frowned. You should know the obligations of society. Mother, being a woman, often spoke incoherently in such situations. However, her verbosity easily outmatched my father and me. Education makes people too argumentative. Father said nothing more, but in this simple statement, I saw all the dissatisfaction he had with me. That night, Father changed the subject and asked when to invite the guests. Asking me, who was idly lounging around, was his way of compromising. I bowed my head to my easygoing father and settled on a date with him. Before the agreed-upon date, a major event occurred. News of Emperor Meiji's illness spread throughout Japan. This news blew away the plans for my graduation celebration. We should probably cancel, Father said, reading the newspaper with his glasses on. He seemed to be contemplating his illness. I recalled seeing the emperor at my graduation ceremony just recently. Chapter 4. In our old house, too spacious for its few inhabitants, I unpacked my trunk and began to study. However, I couldn't settle down. I felt more focused in my small Tokyo lodging where the sound of distant streetcars kept me company. I often dozed off at my desk and occasionally took full naps, bringing out a pillow. When I awoke, I heard the cicadas. Their continuous noise, seemingly from a dream, suddenly felt overwhelming and sad. I wrote short postcards or long letters to my friends, some still in Tokyo, others back in their hometowns. Some replied, while others didn't. I didn't forget Sensei. I wrote 3 pages in fine print about my life since returning home and sent it to him. As I sealed the letter, I wondered if Sensei was still in Tokyo. If he and his wife were away, a middle-aged woman usually looked after their house. When I once asked Sensei about her, he asked what I thought. I had mistakenly believed she was a relative. Sensei replied, "I have no relatives." He had no contact with his family in his hometown. The woman was a relative of Sensei's wife, not Sensei. As I mailed the letter, I thought of her tying a narrow sash easily at her back. I wondered if she would forward the letter if Sensei was away. Although the letter contained nothing urgent, I was lonely and hoped for a reply. However, no reply came. Father no longer played shogi as often as he did last winter. The shogi board, covered in dust, was left in the alcove. Especially after the emperor's illness, Father seemed to brood. He eagerly awaited the newspaper each day, reading it first and then bringing it to me. "Look, there's more news about the emperor today," he'd say. Father always referred to the emperor as Tenshi-sama. I hate to say it, but the emperor's illness might be similar to mine. Father's face was clouded with deep concern. His words worried me, reminding me that he could collapse at any moment. But I should be fine. If someone as insignificant as me can manage, then surely. Father tried to reassure himself while sensing the impending danger. Father is really afraid of his illness. He doesn't seem to think he'll live another 10 or 20 years. Mother looked troubled by my words. Try suggesting shogi again. I dusted off the shogi board from the alcove. Chapter 5. Father's health gradually declined. The old straw hat with the handkerchief attached was naturally neglected. Whenever I saw the hat on the shelf, I felt sorry for my father. When he was more active, I worried about his overexertion. When he was sedentary, I wished he could move like before. I often discussed his health with my mother. "It's all in his mind," Mother said, linking the emperor's illness to Father's. I didn't fully agree. It's not just psychological. His health seems to be genuinely deteriorating. I considered bringing in a reputable doctor from afar. "This summer must be disappointing for you. You graduated, but we couldn't celebrate, and your father is ill. And then there's the emperor's illness. It might have been better to have had the celebration right away." I returned home in early July, and my parents decided to celebrate a week later. The chosen date was another week ahead. Living leisurely in the countryside saved me from an unpleasant social obligation, but my mother didn't realize this. When news of the emperor's passing came, Father held the newspaper and said, "Ah! Ah! Ah! The emperor has passed away. I too." He left the sentence unfinished. I went to town to buy black crepe for mourning. I used it to cover the flagpole and attach a 3-inch wide strip which I hung from the gate. The flag and black strip hung limply in the still air. The old thatched roof of our gate, worn by rain and wind, had turned a pale gray and had uneven patches. Standing outside the gate, I looked at the flag, the black strip, the white fabric, and the red sun. I also looked at the weathered thatch roof. I remembered Sensei asking, "What does your house look like? Is it different from homes in my hometown?" I both wanted to show him my childhood home and felt embarrassed by it. I returned inside, sat at my desk, and read the newspaper, imagining distant Tokyo. I pictured the dark, bustling city and Sensei's house as a single point of light. I didn't realize that this light was also being swallowed by the silent vortex and was destined to disappear. I thought about writing to Sensei about the Emperor's passing, but only wrote 10 lines before tearing it up. There was no point in writing about such things to Sensei, especially since he rarely replied. I was lonely and wrote letters hoping for a response. However, no reply came. Chapter 6. In mid-August, I received a letter from a friend offering a teaching position at a local middle school. This friend was always looking for such positions due to financial needs. He initially had this position but found something better and offered it to me. I immediately declined and suggested he offer it to someone else who needed it more. After replying, I told my parents about the offer. They didn't object to my refusal. There must be better opportunities. Their excessive expectations for me were evident. They hoped for an inappropriate position and salary for a recent graduate like me. Good positions are hard to come by these days. Times are different from when my brother graduated. Still, you need to become independent. I can't keep answering awkwardly when people ask about your job. Father made a sour face. He had no concept of leaving his familiar hometown. He wanted to secure a respectable position for me, while I, thinking of Tokyo as my base, felt out of place. My mother suggested asking Sensei for help, seeing him as someone to turn to in times of need. However, Sensei advised me to secure my inheritance before my father passed away, not to help find a job. "What does Sensei do?" Father asked. "Nothing," I replied. I had told my parents that Sensei did nothing long ago, and they should have remembered. How come? Someone you respect should have some role. Father's comments suggested he thought of Sensei as a vagrant. Even someone like me, though not drawing a salary, doesn't just idle around, Father said, and I remained silent. "Why don't you ask this esteemed person for help?" Mother asked. "No," I replied. "Why not? Write to him." "Okay." I gave a half-hearted response and left. Chapter 7. Father clearly feared his illness, but didn't trouble the doctor with questions. The doctor, in turn, avoided giving clear answers. Father seemed to think about the future, at least imagining life after his death. Educating children is a double-edged sword. Once they're educated, they never come home. My brother's job took him to a distant region, and I planned to stay in Tokyo. Father's complaints were understandable. His vision of my mother alone in the old house was undoubtedly lonely. Father believed the family home was immovable and that Mother would remain there as long as she lived. Leaving her alone in the house after his death worried him. Yet he urged me to seek a position in Tokyo, a contradiction I found amusing but also pleasing. I needed to appear as if I were actively seeking a position. I wrote to Sensei, detailing our circumstances and asking for help. I doubted Sensei would respond or be able to assist, but believed he would reply. Before sending the letter, I showed it to my mother. I wrote to Sensei, as you suggested. "Here, read it." As expected, she didn't read it. "Good, send it quickly. These things should be done promptly." She still saw me as a child. I felt like a child. But a letter isn't enough. I'll have to go to Tokyo. True, but there might be a good opportunity. It's best to ask early. Yes, I'm sure he'll reply, and we'll discuss it then. I trusted Sensei's punctuality. I eagerly awaited his reply, but it never came. He must have gone somewhere for the summer. I made excuses to my mother and myself, needing to believe in Sensei's reliability. Sometimes I forgot about Father's illness and thought about going to Tokyo early. Father also forgot his illness, not taking steps for the future. I never mentioned the inheritance division, as Sensei suggested. Chapter 8. In early September, I prepared to return to Tokyo and asked Father to continue sending money for a while. I need to be in Tokyo to find a suitable position. I'll manage for a while, but you must become independent soon. Graduates shouldn't rely on others. Father scolded me for not understanding the need to earn money. I listened silently. After the scolding, I quietly stood. Father asked when I was leaving. As soon as possible. Ask your mother to choose a date. Yes. I was unusually compliant, wanting to leave without upsetting Father. He stopped me. It will be lonely when you go. It's just your mother and me, and I'm not in good health. I tried to comfort Father and returned to my room. Sitting among my scattered books, I reflected on his words. I heard the cicadas again, this time the cries of the late summer tsukutsuku bushi. I often felt sad sitting alone in the countryside. This sadness seemed to resonate with the loud insect sounds. My melancholy changed after returning home this summer. As the cicada cries changed, the fate of those around me seemed to shift slowly. Comparing Father's attitude and words with Sensei's lack of response, I thought about them both. They gave me contrasting impressions, making them easy to think of together. I knew almost everything about Father. If I left, I'd only miss him sentimentally. But I knew little about Sensei, including his promised past. Sensei remained a mystery, and I needed clarity. Losing contact with Sensei would be painful. I asked my mother to choose a departure date. Chapter 9. Just before I was set to leave, Father collapsed again. I was packing my trunk when Mother, helping Father in the bath, called for me. I saw Father, naked, being supported by Mother. As we brought him back to the room, he said he was fine. I sat by his pillow, cooling his head with a wet cloth until I had a quick dinner around 9 o'clock. The next day, Father seemed better, walking to the bathroom despite our warnings. I'm fine. He repeated the words he had said last winter when he collapsed, and he had been fine then. This time, too, I thought he might recover. However, the doctor only advised caution and gave no clear answers. I was too anxious to leave for Tokyo. Should I stay longer? I asked Mother. Yes, please do, she replied. Mother was calm when Father was active, but overly worried when he collapsed. Weren't you supposed to leave for Tokyo today? Father asked. Yes, I delayed it, I replied. For my sake, Father asked. I hesitated, admitting it would affirm the seriousness of his condition. I didn't want to worry him, but he seemed to see through me. I'm sorry, he said, looking towards the garden. I returned to my room and looked at the packed trunk, wondering if I should unpack it. I spent another 3 or 4 days in limbo. Then Father collapsed again. The doctor insisted on complete rest. What should we do? Mother whispered, looking distressed. I prepared to send telegrams to my brother and sister. Despite the doctor's orders, Father seemed to be in no pain and conversed as if he had a simple cold. His appetite even increased, and he disregarded our warnings. I want to eat well if I'm going to die. His words sounded both amusing and sad. He lived where tasty food wasn't readily available. At night, he even asked for roasted rice cakes. Why am I so thirsty? I must have some strength left. Mother found hope in unlikely places, even using the old term thirsty to mean hungry. When Uncle visited, Father kept him for a long time, partly because he was lonely, and partly to complain about not being allowed to eat as he wished. Chapter 10. Father's illness continued in the same state for over a week. During that time, I wrote a long letter to my brother in Kyushu and had my mother write to my sister. I thought this might be the last communication about Father's health that I'd send them. I included instructions for both to come if things got critical. My brother had a busy job, and my sister was pregnant, so I couldn't call them until Father was in imminent danger. However, it would be heartbreaking if they made the effort to come only to find they were too late. I felt an unspoken responsibility regarding the timing of the telegram. I can't say for certain, but I know that danger could come at any time, the doctor from town told me. I discussed with Mother, and we arranged for a nurse from the town hospital through this doctor. When Father saw the woman in the white uniform by his bedside, he made a strange face. Father had long been aware of his terminal illness, yet he didn't realize how imminent death was. When I recover, I'll go to Tokyo again. You never know when you might die, so it's best to do what you want while you're alive. Mother, reluctantly playing along, replied, "Then I'll accompany you this time." At other times, Father was very melancholic. "When I die, please take good care of your mother." I recalled these words. Sensei had said them repeatedly to his wife the night of my graduation. I remembered Sensei's smiling face and his wife covering her ears, saying it was bad luck. Sensei's words had been a simple hypothetical, but what I heard from my father was a pending reality. I couldn't handle it like Sensei's wife had, but I had to say something to comfort Father. "Don't speak so weakly. You'll recover and visit Tokyo with Mother. You'll be amazed at how much has changed. The new train lines alone will surprise you. The city never stops evolving." I spoke more than necessary, and Father listened contentedly. With a patient in the house, we had many visito. Relatives from nearby came to visit, some from quite a distance. They would say things like, "He looks fine, he's talking freely, and he hasn't lost any weight." The once quiet house had become increasingly busy. Amidst the commotion, Father's condition worsened. I finally sent telegrams to my brother and sister. My brother responded that he would come immediately, and my sister's husband also said they were coming. Since my sister had miscarried before, her husband might come in her place this time to ensure she took care. Chapter 11. Despite the chaos, I still found time to sit quietly and occasionally read 10 pages in one sitting. My previously tightly packed trunk had been unpacked. I pulled out various items as needed. Reflecting on my summer goals, I realized I hadn't accomplished even a third. I'd experienced this frustration before, but never as acutely as this summer. I accepted it as part of life, but still felt irritated. While grappling with this frustration, I also thought about Father's illness and what would happen after his death. Simultaneously, I thought about Sensei. I saw two contrasting figures in terms of status, education, and personality. One day, while sitting amid my scattered books, Mother entered. "Take a nap, you must be tired." Mother didn't understand my feelings. I wasn't a child expecting her to. I thanked her simply. She stood at the entrance. "How's Father?" I asked. "He's resting well. She suddenly sat beside me. "Have you heard from Sensei?" She believed my earlier assurances that Sensei would reply. I had promised a response, but didn't expect the answer they hoped for. I had inadvertently deceived her. "Why not write another letter?" she suggested. I didn't mind writing more letters if it comforted her, but it pained me to bother Sensei. I feared his disapproval more than any scolding from my parents. "Writing is easy, but this isn't something that can be resolved by mail. I need to go to Tokyo and ask in person. But with your father's condition, who knows when you can go?" "Exactly. I won't leave until he's either recovered or it's clear he won't." "That's obvious. No one could leave a critically ill parent." Initially, I pitied Mother's ignorance, but I couldn't understand why she brought this up now. Perhaps she had room in her heart to think beyond the illness, unlike me. Then she said, "While your father is still alive, it would be good for him to know you have a secure position. He'd be at ease. It might not happen in time, but if it did, it would be a comfort." I was in a situation where I couldn't fulfill my filial duties. I didn't write another letter to Sensei. Chapter 12. When my brother arrived, Father was reading the newspaper in bed. He always read the paper, and now more than ever he wanted to avoid boredom. Mother and I let him do as he pleased. "If he's this lively, that's great." "I thought it would be worse," my brother said, his cheerful tone seeming out of place to me. But when alone with me, he was more subdued. "Shouldn't he avoid reading?" "I think so, but he insists, so there's no choice." My brother listened quietly. He then asked if Father could understand well, suspecting his illness affected his cognition. "He's fine. I talked to him for 20 minutes, and he was coherent. He might last longer than we think." My sister's husband arrived around the same time and was even more optimistic. Father discussed my sister's health with him, advising against travel. "When I recover, we'll come visit." Father learned about General Nogi's death first from the newspaper. "This is terrible," he said, startling us. "Did you think he'd gone mad?" my brother later asked. "Yes, I was shocked," my sister's husband agreed. The newspapers were eagerly awaited in the countryside. I read them carefully to Father and kept them for myself when busy. I couldn't forget the images of General Nogi and his wife in traditional attire. During this somber time, I received a telegram from Sensei asking if I could visit. In a place where even a telegram was a big event, Mother was shocked and called me aside. "What's this?" she asked as I opened it. It simply asked if I could come. I was puzzled. "It must be about the job we asked for," Mother guessed. I thought it might be, but it seemed strange. I decided I couldn't leave Father's side and replied with a telegram saying I couldn't come because of Father's critical condition. I also wrote a detailed letter explaining the situation, but Mother was disappointed. Chapter 13. My letter was quite long. Mother and I expected a prompt response from Sensei. 2 days later, I received another telegram saying not to worry about coming. I showed it to Mother. "Sensei must plan to help you with a job," she speculated. I wasn't sure. Given Sensei's usual behavior, it seemed odd. The letter must not have reached him yet. This telegram must be from before he read it. Mother agreed, though it was obvious. That day, the main doctor was scheduled to visit with the hospital director, so we didn't discuss the matter further. The doctors administered an enema, and Father seemed more comfortable. Since being confined to bed, Father had to rely on others for his needs. At first, he was reluctant, but gradually he became less concerned. He sometimes soiled the bedding, but didn't mind. Father's urine output was minimal, and his appetite waned. He rarely ate, and even when he did, it was only a little. He lost interest in the newspaper, and his reading glasses remained in their case. A childhood friend named Saku, who now lived about a mile away, came to visit. Father turned his dull eyes towards Saku and said, "Ah, Saku, thank you for coming. I envy your health. I'm done for." "That's not true. Both your children graduated from university. You have nothing to complain about. Look at me. My wife's gone. I have no kids, and I'm just existing. Health means nothing without joy." The enema was done 2 or 3 days after Saku's visit. Father felt much better and was cheerful, seemingly more confident in his longevity. Encouraged by this, Mother told him about Sensei's telegram, implying I had secured a position in Tokyo. I felt uneasy but couldn't interrupt. Father was pleased. "That's wonderful," my sister's husband said. "What kind of job?" my brother asked. I couldn't bring myself to deny it. I gave a vague reply and left the room. Chapter 14. Father's illness progressed close to the final stage, then seemed to hesitate. The family went to bed each night, wondering if fate would declare itself that day. Father didn't suffer severe pain, which made nursing easier. Someone stayed up each night, but the rest of us could sleep in our beds. One night, unable to sleep, I thought I heard Father groaning and checked on him. Mother was on duty but had fallen asleep. Father was resting peacefully. I returned to bed quietly. I shared a mosquito net with my brother. My sister's husband, treated as a guest, slept separately. "Mr. Seki must be tired. He can't go home yet," I said. Seki was his surname. "He's not very busy, so he can stay. You must be more troubled by this long stay," I replied. "It's unavoidable. This is different from other matters." Lying next to my brother, I said these bedtime stories. Both of us knew Father wouldn't recover. We waited for his death, but as his children, we hesitated to express it. We understood each other's thoughts without speaking. "Father seems to think he'll recover," my brother said. He had a point. Father insisted on meeting visitors and expressed regret about not holding a celebration for my graduation, occasionally mentioning plans for when he recovered. "I'm glad we didn't have a celebration for your graduation. It was rough during mine," my brother said, reminding me of the chaotic event fueled by alcohol. We weren't very close. As children, we often fought, and I, being younger, always cried. Our different academic paths reflected our differing personalities. In university, especially after meeting Sensei, I viewed my brother as animalistic. We hadn't seen each other for a long time, but meeting again, a natural sibling bond emerged, especially under these circumstances. By our dying father's bedside, we shook hands. "What will you do now?" my brother asked. I asked a completely unrelated question. "What about the family's finances?" "I don't know. Father hasn't said anything, but the money isn't significant." Mother was still worried about Sensei's reply. "Is there any letter from Sensei yet?" she asked. Chapter 15. "Who is this Sensei you keep mentioning?" my brother asked. "I told you before," I replied, annoyed by his forgetfulness. "I heard, but I don't understand." From my perspective, there was no need for my brother to understand Sensei, but I was still irritated. My brother assumed anyone I respected must be famous, likely a university professor. He couldn't see value in an unknown, idle person, just like Father. Unlike Father, who quickly concluded that Sensei was just lazy, my brother suggested Sensei was a worthless idler despite his abilities. An egotist is no good. Living without doing anything is lazy. One must use their talents to the fullest. I wanted to ask if he understood the word egotist. But if he gets you a position, that's fine. Father seems happy. Without a clear letter from Sensei, I couldn't believe that. Mother's premature assumptions had spread, making it hard for me to deny. I awaited Sensei's letter, hoping it would confirm the job. I had to care about things I wouldn't usually worry about, considering my dying father, my hopeful mother, my critical brother, and other relatives. When Father vomited a strange yellow substance, I remembered the danger Sensei and his wife had mentioned. Seeing Mother's ignorant face, I teared up. When my brother and I met in the living room, he asked if I had heard what the doctor told him. I understood without explanation. "Are you willing to come back and manage the household?" he asked. I didn't reply. Mother can't handle it alone. He saw me as someone who could decay in the countryside. "You can read books in the countryside without needing to work. It's perfect." "You should come back," I said. "I can't do that," he rejected outright. He was eager to pursue his career. "If you don't want to, we can ask Uncle, but we must decide about Mother." It's uncertain if Mother would leave here. Before Father's death, we discussed what to do after. Chapter 16, Father began to mutter incoherently. "I'm sorry, General Nogi. It's disgraceful. I'll follow soon." Mother found this unsettling and wanted everyone by his side. During his lucid moments, Father seemed to prefer this. Whenever Mother wasn't in sight, Father would ask, "Where's Oko?" Or his eyes would convey the question. I often went to fetch her. "Do you need anything?" she'd ask, dropping what she was doing to come to the sick room. Sometimes, Father just stared at her silently. Other times he'd say things like, "Oko, thank you for everything," in a kind voice. Mother would tear up and then remember the stern father from before. "He says such pitiful things, but he was very harsh," she'd recall, telling stories of when Father hit her with a broom. My brother and I had heard these stories many times, but now they felt like cherished memories. Despite facing death, Father didn't express any last wishes. "Shouldn't we ask if he has anything to say?" my brother asked me. "Yes," I replied, though I was hesitant to bring it up for Father's sake. We consulted our uncle, who was also unsure. It would be a shame if he has things left unsaid, but pressing him might be cruel. The conversation stalled. Then Father fell into a coma. Mother, not understanding, mistook it for sleep and was relieved. "It's good he can sleep peacefully," she said. Father would occasionally open his eyes and ask about people who had been there moments ago. His consciousness had dark and light patches connected like white threads through the darkness. Mother's mistake was understandable. His speech became slurred, making it hard to understand him, but he would start talking in a strong voice. We had to speak loudly near his ear. "Does cooling your head feel good?" "Yes." I replaced Father's water pillow and put a new ice bag on his head. As I pressed the sharp ice fragments, my brother came in and silently handed me a letter. Taking it with my free hand, I immediately sensed something unusual. It was much heavier than a normal letter, not in a regular envelope, but wrapped in paper and carefully sealed. Seeing Sensei's name written on it, I knew it was registered. Unable to open it immediately, I slipped it into my pocket. Chapter 17, Father seemed particularly unwell that day. When I stood to go to the toilet, my brother stopped me, saying, "Stay close, something feels off." I agreed and returned to the sick room, leaving the letter in my pocket. Father opened his eyes and asked Mother to name everyone present. She explained each person, and Father nodded. "Thank you all for your care," Father said. then fell back into a coma. We sat in silence, watching. Eventually, people started leaving the room one by one. I was the third to leave, intending to read the letter. It wasn't something I could quickly read by Father's side. I needed time. I tore the strong wrapping paper, revealing neatly written pages folded for convenience. I smoothed them out. I wondered what this volume of paper and ink could tell me. I also worried about the sick room. I had a premonition I'd be called before finishing. I couldn't focus on reading Sensei's writing. I anxiously read the first page. When you asked about my past, I couldn't answer. Now I believe I have the freedom to tell you clearly. However, this freedom is temporary. If I don't use it now, I'll lose the chance to share my past with you. I'm forced to write instead of speaking. Only then did I understand the letter's purpose. I never expected Sensei to write about my job. But why had Sensei, who hated writing, taken the time to document this event? Why couldn't he wait until I visited Tokyo? Freedom has come, but it will soon be lost forever. I repeated this, struggling to grasp its meaning. I felt sudden anxiety and continued reading. Just then, my brother called loudly from the sick room. I jumped up and ran, expecting Father's final moment. Chapter 18. A doctor was already there, preparing an enema to ease Father's discomfort. The nurse was resting in another room. My inexperienced brother fumbled, asking for my help before sitting down. I took over, placing oil paper under Father's hips. Father seemed more comfortable. After observing for 30 minutes, the doctor left, asking to be called if needed. I left the sick room to read Sensei's letter, but couldn't relax. I felt I'd be called again, fearing it would be the end. I flipped through the pages without really reading, my eyes just seeing the neat writing. I reached the last page and was about to put it down when a line near the end caught my eye. By the time you receive this letter, I will no longer be in this world. I will be dead. I was stunned. My anxious heart felt frozen. I flipped back, skimming a line per page. I tried to pierce through the scattered words with my eyes, seeking the critical information. All I wanted was to know if Sensei was alive. His past, the dark past he promised to reveal, was irrelevant now. I folded the long letter in frustration. I checked on Father. The sick room was surprisingly quiet. I gestured for my weary-looking mother to come over. "How is he?" I asked. "He seems a bit better," she replied. I approached Father and asked, "How do you feel after the enema?" He nodded and clearly said, "Thank you." His mind wasn't as clouded as I feared. I returned to my room, checked the train schedule, and hastily packed Sensei's letter. I left through the back door and ran to the doctor's house. I wanted to ask if Father could last a few more days, hoping for a miracle. The doctor was out. I couldn't wait for his return and rushed to the station. At the station, I scribbled a quick note for Mother and my brother, explaining my sudden departure. It was a simple note, but better than leaving without a word. I asked the rickshaw driver to deliver it urgently and boarded the Tokyo-bound train. On the noisy third, Nash class train, I finally read Sensei's letter from start to finish. Concluding remarks for Kokoro by Natsume Soseki. Thank you for joining us for this reading of Kokoro by Natsume Soseki. This profound and thought-provoking novel offers a deep exploration of the human heart, delving into themes of friendship, guilt, and the isolation that often accompanies modern life. The story's structure, divided into 3 parts, allows us to follow the narrator's relationship with Sensei, uncovering the layers of Sensei's past and his inner turmoil. The depiction of Sensei's loneliness and his complex emotions provides a poignant look at the impact of personal secrets and the weight of unresolved guilt. One of the most compelling aspects of Kokoro is its timeless relevance. The character's struggles with identity, trust, and emotional connection resonate deeply with readers, regardless of the era. Soseki's masterful use of language and his ability to convey the intricacies of the human psyche make this novel a timeless masterpiece. As we reflect on this narrative, we are reminded of the importance of empathy and understanding in our relationships. The novel's exploration of the silent battles we all face encourages us to approach others with compassion and kindness. We hope you enjoyed this journey through one of Japan's literary treasures. If you appreciate our readings, please subscribe to our channel for more English narrations of various Japanese literary works. We look forward to sharing more stories with you. Until then, goodbye and take care. Thank you for listening.